One candidate off the list, but another one joins. Al Harris, the coach we've been waiting to talk about and finally have reason to do so.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network around. I'm David Harrison, your guy on the ground, credentialed member of the media, covering the Washington Commanders for WUSA 9, also writing for Commanders on SI, here with you 5 days a week. And coming up on today's episode, why Al Harris is exciting, but he's not taking over the top spot on our defensive coordinator rankings just yet, and what his defense might look like that we haven't seen in Washington for the past 2 seasons if he were to be the new defensive coordinator of the Washington Commanders. But first, if Al Harris is hired, you can bet on one thing, no matter what, that the Commanders are never going to go down without a fight. Again, all that coming up on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And it's all brought to you today by Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Nothing, and I mean nothing, guarantees success in the National Football League, really in life just in general. But if the Washington Commanders hire Al Harris, Chicago Bears defensive pass game coordinator, defensive backs coach, to be the next defensive coordinator of the Washington Commanders, what I can promise you is that the Washington Commanders defense that you see on the field in 2026 and moving forward will be far less passive than the one that we've seen the past 2 seasons. The 2025 Commanders, just to put it bluntly, were just kind of vanilla, a little bit plain. Finished the year with a total of 10 takeaways, which ranked 31st in the National Football League. Hard to believe that there was another team that had fewer takeaways, but there was actually one. They had only 8 interceptions all season long. Very much a bend, don't break defense that broke way too often to even carry that moniker. The tackling was suspect. A lot of times, Bobby Wagner, the most consistent tackler, certainly on the team, but the Washington Commanders also did everything they could to funnel the action towards Bobby Wagner to take advantage of that fact. Pass rush pretty much non-existent, especially after Dorrance Armstrong Jr. was injured and lost for the season, and they never found a way to manufacture, honestly, never really sought out a way to manufacture more of a pass rush, and turned into basically just a react to the ball and, go after the tackle type of defense, and it didn't work clearly at all or very often. Al Harris would not be coming to Washington to simply fix the tackling situation, though obviously he would be asked about the tackling situation, but what he would be doing is coming to instill fear in the quarterback once again, and that is ultimately how you really start to impact opposing offenses, is by impacting the brain piece of the opposing quarterback. Al Harris, he's not going to prevent yards. He's going to go after the football, and that's what, ball is life and all that stuff that we've been hearing. That is exactly what Al Harris is going to bring if he were, again, to become the next defense coordinator of the Washington Commanders. So the difference between hoping for turnovers and going after turnovers basically is what you see in what the Washington Commanders have been doing and what Al Harris has been a part of doing. And again, Al Harris has not been a defensive coordinator himself, so we're always talking, everything we're talking about here is not a Al Harris defense in the sense that he constructed it, he coordinated, he did the play calling, things like that. It's just staffs that he's been a part of as a would-be first-time defensive coordinator. But again, in the Commanders in 2025, 8 interceptions. The Chicago Bears in 2025, 23 interceptions, top in the NFL, nearly tripling the amount of interceptions the Washington Commanders had this last season. And they didn't do it with a bunch of studs. There are certainly studs on the Chicago Bears defense, but a guy like Nahshon Wright, probably didn't hear about him before 2025, but in 2025, he had 5 interceptions this season, had 1 interception in his entire career entering this year. That's the type of thing that the play style that Al Harris has been a part of will help to produce. Also helped a guy like Trevon Diggs, had 11 interception in his second season under this type of a system, under Al Harris's tutelage as a DB coach in Dallas, things like that. That's exactly what you're looking for if you're bringing in a guy like Al Harris. And of course, the Washington Commanders bringing him in for an interview. That's what's going to attract them to a candidate like this. So how does it happen, right? Because it's not just luck. It's not just, oh, passes were deflected and things like that. Don't get me wrong. Every defense can benefit. We saw the Washington Commanders, even with their 31st ranked takeaway rate, we saw them benefit from some oopsies from some opponents over just generating their own turnover. So some of them, obviously, you're going to take advantage of those. But the Chicago Bears defense this year under Al Harris and under defense coordinator Dennis Allen specifically went out there and made their own luck, right? DBs in Washington were basically playing the receivers. They kept their eyes on the receiver, and there was, when the receiver hand goes up, try to stick your arm in the way, do things like that. Chicago Bears, they play the ball. They want their eyes on the quarterback at all times. They want their DBs to see the ball coming out so they can then become a receiver. You can become a person who's attacking the football instead of reacting to the receiver, and you can go and attack it, right? Ball is life. Go attack life. And that's how they lead the league, not only in interceptions, but also in passes defense. And you can't do that if you don't know where the ball is going, if you don't know when the ball is coming. And it's really interesting to see this kind of stuff work because Harris and this defense, they use a split safety shell in Chicago. So you have a lot of too high coverages, but underneath it, what that does is it opens up the door for the cornerbacks to play more aggressively and use what's called bait technique, trying to show the quarterback that there's a window open, but in reality, the eyes are firmly fixed on the quarterback. So when the ball is coming out, the DB is playing the ball because they see it exactly in the moment that it's coming out. That's exactly what an Al Harris defense is expected to look like. It's what Al Harris and the Chicago Bears did here this year, and it's what they've been doing and Al Harris has been doing across his career and other stops as well. So it's a high risk, high reward proposition, right? So in 2011 or 2021, when Trevon Diggs had that career high 11 interceptions and really just kind of exploded onto the scene, he also gave up over 1,000 yards in coverage, in pass coverage that year. So you're going to give up yards, but you're also going to go after the ball. And that's just kind of the trade-off that you're going to have to make. In 2025, that Chicago Bears defense that led the league in interceptions, led the league in takeaways and all those things, led the league in passes defense, 22nd in passing yards allowed, top 10, bottom 10, however you want to rank it, the most passing yards in the NFL in the top 10 of that category. So again, you're going to sacrifice some yards. You're going to sacrifice some chunk plays. You're going to do all these things. That's the price of being aggressive. So the question would then be, do you want to try to live passive to win passive, or do you want to go out fighting? And for me, I've always been a go out fighting type of person. I'd rather die by the sword than anything else. Like that's what I think a defense should be, is you don't just sit back and hope for a mistake or wait for a mistake you can take advantage of. No, go generate that thing. Go run that defense like it's an offense. Go attack. Go set the tone. Go dictate the action, whatever you need to do. That's what Todd Bowles' defense in Tampa, that's when it's at its best. That's what it's doing. And when it beat Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs in the Super Bowl, that's exactly what they did. And some of your best defense. We talk about Brian Flores, who unfortunately is no longer on our rankings list. We'll talk about that here in a little bit later. But that's what he does in Minnesota. So that's the type of guy that personally I want to see, no matter who the staff is. But Al Harris comes from that pedigree, comes from that wheelhouse, obviously had a lot of success with it, especially in 2025. So that's what I would expect, and that's what I would welcome if Al Harris were the defensive coordinator of the Washington Commanders. It's a style that more accurately fits the Dan Quinn mantra of being aggressive, going after the ball, but he doesn't just do it with the defensive backs. That's not where Al Harris's pedigree comes from. The way that the front seven operates in his experience is just as aggressive. We're going to dive into that and more coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On Commanders is brought to you in part by Robinhood. What if sports were traded like markets? Now you can put your sports IQ to work in real time with Robinhood Prediction Markets. It's not you against the house. It's you participating in a live market. You can buy or sell your positions live all game long. Use your sports knowledge in the moments that matter. Robinhood Prediction Markets changes the game. It's people moving the action. So when momentum shifts, you can move with it. I always knew the game, but never had a dynamic way to apply that knowledge. Now I can actually take part live in a market powered by people, where you're no longer just a spectator. Play by play, you decide, trade every play with Robinhood, now available across the U.S. Download the Robinhood app now to begin. Futures and cleared swaps trading involves significant risk and is not appropriate for everyone. Event contracts are offered by Robinhood Derivatives, LLC, a registered futures commission merchant and swap firm. Today's episode of Locked On Commanders also brought to you in part by Game Time. With the NFL season coming to a close, the postseason coming to a close, and the local season for some of us already come to a close. There's still nothing like being amongst the crowd, the noise, the energy. So you still have concerts, you have shows, you have comedy specials happening all over the world, all over the country, in your backyard or wherever you're traveling to, and being there live just is better than anything else. But the frustrating part could be just getting the tickets. You got queues, logins, watching prices change right when you get to the checkout market, all these things the Game Time app fixes to give the advantage back to you. It's the hack to unlock amazing tickets and experiences in just a few taps. You pull up the Game Time app, check out the upcoming events in your area, and find great ticket options almost instantly. So take the guesswork out of buying all your tickets, not just NFL tickets, with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create your account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create your account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today and get back to being there live. Thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day, every day, to the everydayers, those who come through for every single episode. Thank you again for coming through yet again for another one. And thank you to all of you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network around. If you haven't already, please take time, go to lockedoncommanders.supercast.com. Check out the new Everydayer Club. You got membership tier. You got the all access tier. Each tier comes with its own set of benefits. The all access tier gets all of the membership level tier benefits and more. So again, lockedoncommanders.supercast.com to check that out today. Continue our conversation here about Al Harris, Washington Commanders defensive coordinator. Target got confirmation on Wednesday evening that Al Harris is going to interview with the Washington Commanders for their vacant defensive coordinator position. He's also interviewing with the Green Bay Packers, and as of right now, that's all I have confirmation of. However, there is an inkling, at least, that the Dallas Cowboys also want to talk to Al Harris about their opening. So we'll have to see how this thing unfolds. We talked about the secondary, talked about how Al Harris's secondaries that he's coached up in the past and the schemes that he's come from in the past, they all live very aggressively. They like to jump routes. They like to use safeties as top covers to help them protect that aggressive play underneath, all of these things. But it's not just the back end of a defense that you can expect from Al Harris to be aggressive. You can also expect aggression from the front seven and the front side of the defense using big dime and green dog principles. So these are principles that come from Al Harris's history. Again, he's been in plenty of stops, not just Chicago Bears, not just the Dallas Cowboys, also coached up for FAU, the Miami Dolphins, other places as well. And he's gotten exposed to a lot of different methods. But the big dime philosophy is not really something that's new in Washington. We've seen this before. We've seen this, recently in Washington, but it is done in different ways by different people. So the linebacker position in an Al Harris defense, you can look at the possibility that the linebacker position is somewhat minimized. Maybe you play with just one of those guys and you play with a whole lot of safeties that can run around, make plays, be a little bit more athletic. Obviously, Jordan McGee fits the athletic profile of a speed-based defense, which is what you would probably expect with Al Harris. Then you need guys that can run and hit. So Quan Martin is known as one of those guys. Not great necessarily as a cover guy, especially when all he's doing is covering, but he's a run and hit guy, especially if he's running forward. Will Harris can do a little bit of all of it. Obviously, Jeremy Reeves has been known to lay the lumber down on a ball carrier as well. Most coordinators, especially older veteran coordinators, guys like Patrick Graham from the Las Vegas Raiders, one of the defense coordinator candidates, certainly that's on our list. They like to build a wall with big bodies. We talked about this before. 4-man front, all a bunch of big dudes, take up space, eat up blocks, free up the second level to plug the gaps, make good penetration, and all that. Al Harris comes from a school that is more looking for speed. They want more of the ability to penetrate, more of the ability to create chaos, looking at most likely 4-1-6 type of packages. So 4 indicates 4 down defensive linemen, 2 defensive tackles, 2 defensive ends, all with their hand in the dirt, 1 stand-up linebacker, and then you have 6 defensive backs, most of them safeties, like 3 or 4 safeties, and then 2 or 3 cornerbacks, depending on what the offensive formation looks like. In Dallas and Chicago, frequently the systems that Al Harris came from ran those big dime personnel, putting 6 defensive backs on the field, leaving just 1 linebacker. But one of those safeties is that typical hybrid linebacker safety type of dude, a guy that, Kane Medrano has been described as Jeremy Chin was during his time with Washington. So instead of basically forcing the mediocre linebacker onto the field, just to kind of match the lineups. You put your best 11 athletes on the field, whether that be a fourth safety over a second linebacker. Now, with, like I said, Jordan McGee and Frankie Louvu both under contract for 2026. Potentially, you might see more. You might see more 4-2-5, right? You might see those two linebackers on the field. They certainly fit the athletic profile, but just kind of an ideology thing that you might see out of Al Harris. Again, just based off of the staffs that he's been a part of, because we've never seen him run his own system, right? So you compare that against some of the other candidates. Joe Cullen, the Kansas City Chiefs defensive line coach, has 1 year of D coordinator experience back with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Much more of a trench-focused guy, wants to have a heavy defensive front that can be imposing and do those kinds of things, whereas Al Harris is going to play more from the back end and try to match with athleticism versus match with just brute force. That's just, again, coming from the school of thoughts that he's come from, which matches Adam Peters' draft strategy, because if you haven't noticed over the last 2 years, Adam Peters loves to draft him a super athlete. So that's the big dime package in a nutshell. The green dog, or simulated pressure. This is something that we also talked about with the Brian Flores episode once he became a known candidate for the Washington Commanders defensive coordinator spot. Now, you had a very passive defense prior to Dan Quinn arriving, and when Dan Quinn arrived with Joe Witt Jr. in 2024, blitzes came, and they were somewhat effective. A lot of pressure, not so many sacks, or there was a good amount of sacks, don't get me wrong, but not as many sacks, especially from guys like Dorrance Armstrong that you want to see. Dante Fowler obviously came through, had a great season for himself. Frankie Louvu, second team All-Pro, things like that. They brought a lot of chaos. Most of it, pretty much all of it, came from the linebacker level. And then in 2025, the blitz rate fell to about 20%, and they basically lived passive, which unfortunately, it's just kind of sad to see a thing like that die without a whole lot of fight back in it. But that's unfortunately what we saw from the Washington Commanders in 2025. The Al Harris version, you're probably going to live around the 27 to 29%, right around the 30% blitz rate, which is kind of that area in the NFL that seems to be settled in between, the line between, do you blitz too much or do you blitz not enough? 30% blitz rate. I mean, you're talking nearly a third of the defensive snaps you're bringing some sort of a blitz. But when you're not blitzing, you're not bringing that fifth or more rushers to the party. What you are doing is you're bringing simulated pressures. And this is something that we didn't see nearly enough from the Washington Commanders defense. That was really frustrating, because I know that they know the value of it. They just, for whatever reason, didn't use it as much in the systems you see Al Harris coming out of, which includes Dallas under Dan Quinn at times, right? So again, more frustration and confusion to why it wasn't used more last year or even the year before, is you bring 6 guys to the line of scrimmage, bring 6, even 7 guys sometimes to the line of scrimmage, stress out the quarterback, make him have to wonder, where's the pressure coming from? Stress out the protection plan on the offensive line. Again, where's the pressure coming from? And then at the snap, a lot of times you bring 6 to the line of scrimmage, 2 of them fall off into coverage, 4 of them come rushing. If the offensive line didn't guess correctly or the quarterback didn't guess correctly, sometimes you end up with a free rusher. Either way, you end up with a quarterback that's got to take a beat after the snap to figure out, was I right in my assumption? Was I wrong in my assumption? Sometimes you even have 6 guys up on the line of scrimmage. 4 of those guys drop out, only 2 of them rush, and then you have a safety coming in, and one of those guys is falling back to replace that safety in coverage, and you do things like that to play games with the offensive line, with the protection, with the quarterback. So you're still getting 3-4 man pressures, but it looks more like a blitz because of the way that it's coming. And then you've got the green dog effect, which is basically usually a linebacker saying, if my man blocks, I'm gonna blitz. And typically this guy's on the running back. And if the running back gets checked into a protection, and hey, you're staying in to help block the pass rush, instead of just standing out there guarding grass doing nothing, go look for work. Your man stays in the block, you're rushing. And if you're lucky, and sometimes what you see happen is that running back ends up having to block a free rusher, because again, the simulated pressure up front confused the pass coverage, ended up with a free rusher. That running back's got to go out there, sacrifice the body to block that free rusher. Well, now if you were covering that running back and that was your assignment, and you do your green dog assignment, you blitz because he stayed in, now he's no longer there to keep you from getting to the quarterback. And again, that's how you generate pressure. And sometimes you're only bringing 1 extra guy. Sometimes you're bringing a 4th guy. Sometimes you dial up a blitz with 5 rushers. And because that running back stays in on a check, you end up with a 6th rusher. It's a very disguise-friendly type of defense, and it's one that confuses quarterbacks all the time, especially younger quarterbacks. And when you look at other candidates, Karl Scott comes from a similar type of tree. Mike McDonald, known for his simulated pressures, known for his confusion. So that's there. Patrick Graham, not so much. He's more of a static type of dude, more of a one-on-one type of, we're just going to beat you straight up then, and we are going to try to confuse you. So that's new candidate on the board, Al Harris. We have one off the board, means we've got a new set of rankings. And while Al Harris sounds very attractive, and believe me, he does, he is actually not our number one guy. That coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On Commanders brought to you in part by Indeed. If you've ever hired someone who looked good on paper but didn't turn out to be the right fit in person, you know how important it is to get that right. When you want the candidates who truly match what you're looking for, trust Indeed sponsored jobs. Hiring Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling at your job post seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs puts your post at the top of the page and helps you get the right candidates faster. Sponsored jobs boost your posts to the people who are the best match for your role, and that makes a real difference. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed are 90% more likely to report a hire than a non-sponsored job. So spend more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with less stress, less time, and more results using Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners to this show get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL. That's Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL right now. Support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. Today's episode is also brought to you in part by TurboTax. Tax season doesn't have to take over your life. This year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever to just hand things off and move on with your day. With TurboTax full service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert start to finish without the stress or the guesswork. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out forms, you can meet with a local TurboTax expert in person, or you can connect online. They handle everything from your W-2s to your self-employed forms and work to get you every deduction possible. You can upload your documents, go about your day, and get updates right in your TurboTax app. It's a huge time saver. It gives you real peace of mind. So for a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150 all in. If a TurboTax expert doesn't file for you last year, all you have to do is file by February 28th. Take taxes off your plate and get back to your life. Visit TurboTax.com/local to book your appointment today. Adding Al Harris to the candidate board for the defense coordinator position of the Washington Commanders. Very exciting. Is a candidate that I know you all have been talking about a lot in the social media landscape, and subscribers have been asking me a lot behind the scenes. We haven't done a full episode on him yet because he was not officially a candidate identified by the Washington Commanders until Wednesday. So very excited to see that. Was very excited to get this episode out. Got to work on it immediately Wednesday night, finished it up Thursday morning so I could drop this for you nice and fresh as we get into this. However, news also came out Wednesday that the Washington Commanders candidacy list also lost one name. Brian Flores is out of the runnings. Brian Flores agreed to a new contract with the Minnesota Vikings to stay their defensive coordinator. Is still in the running for the head coaching jobs for the Baltimore Ravens and the Pittsburgh Steelers. However, if he does not get offered either one of those jobs, will be returning to the Minnesota Vikings as their D coordinator, which of course was also a possibility, even the likely possibility. But again, doing our due diligence, covering every prospect available and every prospect that we know the Commanders are interested in. Brian Flores no longer part of that list. However, Al Harris added to the list, which is still exciting. Number one on our list, however, Karl Scott, Seattle Seahawks defensive backs coach, defense pass game coordinator, moves up to the number one spot. Why he out just barely beats Al Harris for me is because he's not just a Quinn disciple. He is a library of knowledge. In fact, he's not a Dan Quinn disciple at all. Karl Scott, Dan Quinn have no professional crossings. However, they do have some connections. You might remember Dan Quinn has given Nick Saban, Alabama legend, a lot of credit for kind of shaping his mentality about organizational leadership. Dan Quinn worked for Nick Saban in Miami for the Miami Dolphins for the 1 year. Major impact that he made on DQ's life. Well, Nick Saban also hired Karl Scott for a period of time with the Alabama Crimson Tide. And so that's a big connection there for that. If Karl Scott is getting a vote of confidence from Nick Saban behind the scenes, Dan Quinn is going to take that very, very seriously. So it's not a situation where Karl Scott's coming in completely unknown to Dan Quinn. Most likely, again, I can't confirm to you that Dan Quinn has reached out to Nick Saban about him, but I would be surprised if he didn't at least talk to him about it. And that speaks to Karl Scott's resume, right? He's worked under Nick Saban, he's worked under Pete Carroll, he's worked under Mike McDonald, and not just in the same system over and over again, various different systems, 18 years of coaching experience. Karl Scott, again, a wealth of knowledge inside his brain piece coming out of the NFC West. And there is that NFC West factor. Look, Karl Scott's coming from the Seattle Seahawks. So obviously his unit, his defense that he's been part of has been practicing up against the Seattle Seahawks offense all season long. So he's going to know the Seattle Seahawks really, really well. He's also played the 49ers, played the Rams. He's playing the Rams again this weekend. Each of those teams multiple times, the Arizona Cardinals as well. So he's gone up against the McVay offense. He's gone up against the Shanahan offense. He's gone up against the Arizona Cardinals. He's done it multiple times per year. A little bit of a letdown there with the last one. And the Seattle Seahawks have been competitive, right? And again, Karl Scott has been there for multiple years under Pete Carroll, now under Mike McDonald. So this is a guy who's had a lot of experience in the NFC West. The Washington Commanders play the NFC West. They play every single team in the NFC West next season. So that gives you that familiarity coming into your next season opponents. That's not the only reason you hire a guy, but it is a contributing factor. And if you talk about a guy who's cutting his teeth as a play caller, playing as many opponents as you can that you're comfortable with is really important. So Dan Quinn, the defensive staff that remains from the staff from 2025, 2024 can help get Karl Scott up to speed on the Eagles, the Cowboys, the Giants a little bit more comfortably, having the multiple games experience against them that they do. Karl Scott has the multiple games experience against the NFC West. I mean, that's over half your schedule that your defensive staff would now be comfortable going up against. So that's why Karl Scott gets the edge. Al Harris is not far behind. I mean, we're going to rank him number 2, but really it's 1A, 1B as far as I'm concerned. And I know neither of them has play calling experience. That certainly is, I don't want to say concerning, but it's, causes a little bit of worry, causes a little bit of pause. Is why a guy like Brian Flores was at the top of our list outside of just his style of defense and his proven track record. Also, the fact that you could just kind of set him and forget him and let him go do his thing. Al Harris, the turnover king, right? That's what we're going to call him. To me, he jumps Patrick Graham here. He's got a lot of the speeds at the turnovers like we talked about in segments 1 and 2. The aggression that we want to see from all levels of the defense, which is huge. And he's going to really just kind of weaponize the defensive backs. For the last 2 years, the DBs have just kind of been there to react to what happens, and the front seven really just dictates the action. And in Al Harris defense, I would believe that the entire 11-man unit on the defensive side of the ball is going to dictate the action, not just the front seven. And I would love to see it. Number 3 is Patrick Graham. If you can't get one of the two, hot and sexy names and all that kind of stuff, go get your steady veteran. Patrick Graham is that guy. He's our stabilizer coming in at number 3. And honestly, after that, there's a bit of a dip, and then, a bit of a gap, I should say. And then number 4, Joe Cullen. He's got D coordinator experience, comes from a hyper-aggressive background, so I feel like we would get that. Number 5, Denard Wilson, super aggressive in the secondary. Don't know if I really ever saw his plan for the front seven with the Tennessee Titans, and that kind of worries me, which drops him to number 5. And then number 6 is Jonathan Gannon. I think I made it pretty clear here on the episodes. Would not love this hire necessarily, but would believe that if he was the man who got the job, that Dan Quinn did a good job of vetting the talent versus scheme question that comes up in the data of Jonathan Gannon's defenses. So that is our current ranking list. Karl Scott, number 1, Al Harris, number 2, Patrick Graham, number 3, followed by Joe Cullen, Denard Wilson, and Jonathan Gannon. That's going to do it for today's episode. Next time on Locked On Commanders, we're going to continue to ride the news cycle, see what comes of anything in the next 24 hours or so, and we'll break all of that down. So make sure you are subscribed. Follow along on Locked On Commanders so you get the latest episodes, and you can also follow me on X at DHarrison82 or on Instagram at DHarrison_82. And if you never miss an episode, the Everydayer Club is in the name. It literally was built for you. LockedOnCommanders.supercast.com to check that out today. For your next listen, check out Locked On NFL twice per day, once in the morning, once in the afternoon on YouTube or wherever you're listening to today's show. To the Everydayers, I see you. I appreciate you every single day, and I thank you again for coming through today. Until next time, everybody out there, please stay safe, be kind to one another. We'll talk again real soon right here on Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.